Hey guys, I wanted to tell you in this video about my special goals for my library. So over the last couple days, I have been working on cataloging the books in my library, specifically the books in my physical library. I do have many PDF files, but the physical books I find are most important in preserving. And I have a goal of one day having a massive physical library where people who are part of the community can come together and read the books of the library. So I was just saying, basically I have this goal of having my own physical library and a massive library of physical books where people can come together and just like a regular library, but instead of, most libraries have really common books that aren't really valuable. Most of them are fiction, novels, and such, but my library intends to be in a similar level of importance as the libraries of different universities. I won't have a lot of those libraries have actual manuscripts. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to basically just get copies of very important books over time. I'll keep accumulating more and more books. But so over the last couple days, my website, reconstructedbible.wordpress.com, I made a new page which is titled Library of Onya, and it lists all the physical books that I currently own. And I decided to put the books there for people because I want people to see what books I consider valuable, and perhaps I can help other people in their studies to know the kind of books that I'm looking for. And also I would love to hear what people have to share in regards to books that they believe are valuable and that they think should be added to the library. So if you have books, or if you know of books that you think are important and should be included in the list, please feel free to let me know sometime, either in comments or at any time in the future. Just contact me and I will look into adding various books into the library. So if you go to that website, I have it listed by author or translator, and I list it in Hebraic alphabetical order according to my pronunciation of the Hebrew alphabet. So even though it's alphabetical order, you'll see a lot of the letters are in a different order than what you're familiar with the regular alphabet. But I think this website resource will be very valuable for people because it will narrow down for people the books which are important and valuable. So I plan on getting many more books. The most important ones are the Apocrypha books and books related to the Bible. So books in their original languages. I will keep buying books as they come out, special editions, critical editions. There are some really cool ones, cool critical editions that they are working on, which eventually will be published. There's the Coptic Old Testament, a critical edition of the Coptic Old Testament, which is extremely significant. I have like 2/3 of the Babylonian Septuagint series, but the reason I only have 2/3 is because 1/3 of the books haven't been published yet. So once those come out, I'll be buying those Septuagint books as well. Hello, thank you guys for coming on, and hope you enjoy the video. So I have I also have lots of language books for various grammars and dictionaries, because if I want to translate the languages of of the manuscripts for the Bible, I have to learn the languages properly. And so that's why I'm accumulating those resources as well. And I mentioned in the previous video how the parallel languages are very important for my project, such as Arabic, Aramaic, Akkadian, and Ugaritic. I need to study those languages and really understand the deeper meaning of those languages and how they connect with Hebrew, and Ethiopic as well. There's other series as well which are interesting that I might eventually get, including the critical edition of the Syriac Peshitta, as well as the critical edition of the Latin Vulgate. And there is also a critical edition of the Old Latin, but that won't be done anytime soon. It's in its infancy, and they're working on that as well. Old Latin is a very important version. There's also, there's just so many kinds of new books that will be coming out, and critical editions that they're working on. I believe I have heard rumors that they're going to be redoing the entire Dead Sea Scrolls series in a new series. If that's the case, that's going to be pretty awesome. The reason they're redoing it, if they decide to redo it, the reason they're doing that is because new technology has come into development, which has enabled them to have more accurate readings. Because when they have the Dead Sea Scrolls, they basically they took to the best of their abilities, using their eyesight as well as a few other technologies. They tried to read very hard to read writing, because when you look at people's handwriting, it's often very messy and hard to read in any language, and Hebrew is no exception to that. So, in Aramaic, because the Dead Sea Scrolls were in Hebrew and Aramaic. So in the script, some of the manuscripts are hard to read, fragmentary, worn away, pieces are missing, very faded, barely even legible. Well, the new technologies that they've come out with in the recent decades enable them to re-look at all those fragments and have better readings. They can use special lasers, laser vision or something. I forget what the actual term is called, but they can look and highlight the color differentiation, and it will show the different material, and it will make more clear. It will make more clear the letters that are missing or that are hard to read. It's kind of like a way of painting it. They have also coming out with technology. They're trying to develop technology which will allow them to open scrolls digitally. So say there's a scroll that's like in a roll. They are trying to develop technology which can scan that roll, and then the computer program takes that roll of the scroll and it rolls it out and puts it in the proper order. They're trying to do that, and they are able to do that if they can develop a complex enough program. The program has to be a mathematical program, because it's simple, but I don't know, physics or geometry or whatever, but basically the letters are on each sheet. So they just have to scan. If they scan that scroll, the program will see each sheet, and then the program will then somehow be able to like take it in slices and put the slices in the proper order. That's what they're working on for technology, and that if they work on that, if they are successful, they will be able to open Dead Sea Scrolls without damaging them, or other scrolls as well. There's also a series called the Oxyrhynchus Papyri. That hasn't even been finished yet. They're still working on that. There are Akkadian, there are many fragments of Akkadian documents which haven't been published yet. And there are so many writings in various libraries that haven't been published yet. So I believe in the future there's going to be many more books which will be important. And every new book that I believe is important and I decide to buy for my library, I'm going to be putting it on that list on my website. And again, that website that I mentioned is reconstructedbible.wordpress.com, and there's a section there for my library of Onya. And So like I said earlier, if people have suggestions for books they think I should buy and include in my library, please let me know. But that's kind of my goal there for that, and I don't want to just focus on the Bible, but that's the priority. That's the most important aspect, is the scriptures, right? But there are many other writings which are related to the scriptures, which are interesting in their own right as history, but also they have some insight as well. Like such as church father writings, rabbinic writings, they have some interesting historical data. And there's critical editions of the Talmud, for example, of the various church fathers. So I'm inclined to get some of those books in later times as well. Over time, as I have money sufficient to do that, but I don't want to just use all my money for books. That's not wise. But occasionally, every now and then, I'll buy some more books that I believe are important for my studies. And when I have a better flow of income, I can start buying books on a regular basis. Yeah, Josephus, the Quran as well. There's actually a ton of writings in Arabic by the Arabs, which are very interesting, and a lot of books have been only preserved in Arabic. Elsewhere, like they were translated into Arabic, but the original language they were written in, those books are lost. So Arabic is important for that, but a lot of writings in Arabic have not been published into English yet. They haven't been translated into English. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done by the scholars for these different books. But I will be trying to include the most important books, because the fact is there's millions and millions of books, perhaps billions of books now. Every year there's millions of books published. So I will try to narrow down which books I think are most important. So a question is asked, do I have the Palestinian and Aramaic Targum in my library? So I don't have those books in physical copy yet. The reason I don't yet is I don't consider them as important, so I haven't bought them yet. But I do plan on buying them at some point and including them in the library. So the reason I think the Aramaic is less important for the Bible manuscripts, like the Peshitta, for example, for the Old Testament anyway. I think it's not as important it's still important, but I think much less. Okay, sorry. It's less important than like the Septuagint, the Masoretic text, Dead Sea Scrolls, Old Latin, stuff like that. So now Akkadian, like I've mentioned before in some of these other videos, Akkadian and Ugaritic are very important, because what's interesting is that a lot of the information in those writings, now of course these are writings by unbelievers, but they share a cultural milieu, and they share many ideas with the Bible, and so many of those ideas illuminate the Bible and show origins of what the Bible teaches. Like there's a lot of interesting things. If you look up sometime on Google or Wikipedia, there's something called the Babylonian Job. There's something called the Babylonian Ecclesiastes or something like that. Basically, those are pet names for Akkadian books, which their content is very similar to the book of Job and very similar to Ecclesiastes. And there's all kinds of interesting things in these ancient writings, which you kind of think, you think, what in our time today goes back ancient, like 4,000 years ago? Well, you'd be surprised. A lot of what we think and believe in our world today originates all the way back to Babylonians. So it's pretty crazy how so far back in time it's been preserved into our time through passing down generation after generation. So to really understand the history of the world, these ancient writings are important, and I want to study them and purchase various volumes of these ancient writings. But like I said, the priority I'm going to focus on is the biblical texts. But I do think the farther back you go in time, the more important the writings are, generally speaking. So all those ancient writings, very important. The there's very old Greek writings, like the writings of Plato, the writings of Homer and Herodotus, and some other very ancient Greek writers, and their writings are a window into the past. And there's a lot of similarities. Like there's like Plato's ideas, they're very similar to Apocrypha texts as well as New Testament texts. There's a lot of similarities. So it's worth studying and understanding Platonism and how it relates to biblical philosophy. Now, you asked, isn't the Aramaic older going back to the Babylonian captivity? Can you clarify what you mean by that? Because the language itself is very old. Aramaic is dated as early as 1000 BC, and probably earlier, but we have fragments from as early as 1000 BC. But there's even earlier languages which are also related to Hebrew, and that's, as I said, Akkadian and Ugaritic. Now, okay, so older than the Masoretic? No, I mean, no. Well, the thing is, the Masoretic text reached its full form after everything else. I think she just means the versions, the Masoretic version of the Bible. The Masoretic version is, it actually, we have manuscripts of a few books of the Old Testament which match the Masoretic text. Some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Dead Sea Scrolls was a library, and in many times a scribal library had the different traditions. So even though they didn't regard the Masoretic text as reliable, they didn't regard it as reliable as some of the other traditions, they still had it in their library. But so some of the books in the Masoretic text are corroborated by early manuscripts, like the Book of Psalms was actually found in Masada. There's a Masada copy of the Book of Psalms dating to the 1st century or early 2nd century. I forget when Masada, I think maybe it's 1st century, late 1st century. So, but that version of the Book of Psalms is exact to the very character, to the very letter. It's the exact replica of the Masoretic version of the Book of Psalms. So it does go back quite a ways, but in those early manuscripts of what we might call the Proto-Masoretic, meaning the origin of the Masoretic, those early copies of the Masoretic text did not have all those vowel marks, did not have all those special marks on the side margin of the page, things like that. All that was added way later. But the Masoretic text, the actual version, goes back to at least as early as the time of the 1st century BC. And I think that's about when it originated. 1st or 2nd century BC. The Masoretic text as we know it kind of originated around that time, in my view. The Septuagint, I think, originated roughly around 3rd, 2nd century BC. But the Septuagint, as we have it, is not fully preserved of the original Septuagint. There's been changes in the Septuagint over time. So, let's see. And the Aramaic, the Targum, I'm not sure how early the Aramaic Targum is. Targums are. I'm not sure exactly, but I would be inclined to think that they originate around 3rd century AD. And that's just a educated guess. I don't know for sure, but the Targums specifically, as well as the Peshitta. The Syriac Peshitta, I think, originates around 4th century AD, around something like that. Okay. So Muhammad left a comment, but I wasn't really speaking about that. So, but I will just say on that subject. So my view is a little different than what the church believes, but it also would go against what you believe too. But basically, my understanding is that the ancient Israelites had a similar thing to the Trinity, but not quite the same thing. They basically had the Most High, which is ultimate God, that's Father, El Elyon. Then there was the Holy Spirit, which was the feminine aspect, the divine feminine, and that was basically the mother, and was regarded as Asherah. And there, in some ancient, the Israelites as well as Canaanites and such, they actually called the father Asher. Interestingly enough, there was Asher, and the female Asherah. So I think that's where Asherah comes from, the Asher and Asherah. So then there was Baal for the sun, and what's interesting. Oh, okay, yeah. So it's all right. You can ask questions, although you didn't phrase it as a question. You made a statement, but I welcome questions and input. It's all right. Basically, the Israelites worshipped Yahweh, right? They worshipped Yahweh, but they also, in some times, they were worshiping Baal, and the prophets were condemning their particular version of Baal worship. But what I have been discovering, and this is a controversial thing, but I want you guys to give the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to make a video on this soon, okay? So basically, there is evidence that the Israelites, the righteous Israelites, including King David himself, equated Yahweh with Baal. They worshipped him as Baal, because if you compare the similarities with Baal in the Canaanite writings, like Ugaritic texts, they are strikingly similar to the descriptions for Yahweh. And what I believe to be the case is what happened is that, oh yeah, absolutely, I'm open to changing mine on new evidence. I've changed my beliefs over so many times throughout the years. So yeah, feel free to suggest evidence in some of the videos, Muhammad. So basically, for what I'm suggesting here, what happened is that the Israelites started worshiping idols. That's the difference here. They were worshiping idols, and they would call the idols by the name of the god. So they actually built idols of Baal, and they called those idols Baal. Now, for those worshipers, they don't consider those idols to be different gods. They consider them just to be representations of God and conduits to the true God. So they were conduits to Yahweh, conduits to Baal. But in God's eyes, those idols were new gods, different gods, false gods. They were separate than him. So you have the true Baal, the true Yahweh, and then you have the false Yahweh, the false Baal, and those are the idol representations of Yahweh, idol representations of Baal. So the Israelites were worshiping idols of Baal, and so those Baals were false gods, and that's what I believe the prophets were condemning. The prophets were condemning the false Baals, the idols, and they were not condemning the worship of Baal himself. I believe the scribes later on, they actually changed the scriptures to conceal the evidence for Baal. They removed positive references to Baal. It's absolutely proven that the scribes did this. I have abundance of evidence for this. So there's some really cool stuff to show you guys on that, and that's why I want to, for this library as well, it's important to study history, important to study the different cultures, because if we want to have an accurate version of the Bible, we need to have a proper understanding of where the Bible fits in with history. and sometimes there's some parts of the Bible that are in error, inaccurate. Some of the historical statements in the Bible are in error due to the scribes corrupting the text. So it's important to study the history to try to figure out what the original text of the Bible is, and in which parts are accurate and which are not. And you'd be surprised, you know, people might say it's just history, but so what's important about the history, right? But you'd be surprised how significant history can be to shape your beliefs and values and prove things. It can actually prove truths of the world we live in. And some of these ancient writings have amazing wisdom and insights into the truth and into theological mysteries, and as well as ethical truths and scientific truths. So it's very interesting stuff. And so over time I'm going to be adding these books to my library, and I'll be putting, once again, as a final statement, my website, reconstructedbible.wordpress.com, also has a section where I will include all the books in my library, in my physical library. You'll be able to see those books in my website. So anyways, my lunch break's about to end. Sorry, got cut off there. So if you guys have any questions, you feel free to answer, leave a comment in the comment section, or direct message me at my email address. And I appreciate you guys' feedback, and I look forward to doing more videos for you guys, probably maybe tomorrow or later this week. Shalom. God bless you guys. Have a great week.